The recent escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war has drawn global attention due to its precise timing, occurring just ahead of a highly anticipated meeting between former U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russian forces intensified missile and drone strikes across key Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and other strategic locations, sending a clear signal amid rising diplomatic activity. These attacks were not isolated incidents but part of a broader pattern of sustained pressure aimed at testing Ukraine's air defenses and political resolve. Military analysts note that the timing appears deliberate, designed to shape the diplomatic environment before high-level discussions about future U.S. involvement and potential shifts in Western military support. The strikes targeted energy infrastructure, transportation hubs, and military-linked facilities, disrupting civilian life and placing additional strain on Ukraine's already stretched defense systems. From a strategic perspective, Russia's actions underscore its continued reliance on long-range strike capabilities to project power without committing to large-scale ground offensives. The escalation also reflects Moscow's desire to remind both Kyiv and Washington that it retains significant military leverage, regardless of ongoing diplomatic talks. As air raid sirens echoed across Ukrainian cities, international observers were quick to interpret the attacks as more than battlefield maneuvers. They were political messages delivered through military force. The escalation has reinforced concerns that the conflict remains deeply volatile and susceptible to sudden spikes in intensity, particularly when diplomatic milestones approach. For Ukraine, the timing is especially critical, as it seeks to maintain international attention and support while facing persistent pressure from a well-resourced adversary. The attacks ahead of the Trump-Zelensky meeting have therefore elevated the stakes, transforming what might have been a diplomatic discussion into a moment closely watched by global security analysts, policymakers, and military planners alike. Russia's decision to escalate military operations ahead of a major diplomatic moment reflects a calculated strategy rooted in both military doctrine and geopolitical signaling. Historically, Moscow has used force not only to gain territorial or tactical advantages, but also to influence negotiations and shape the perceptions of its adversaries. By intensifying strikes before the Trump-Zelensky meeting, Russia appears to be reinforcing its position that any discussions about Ukraine's future must account for Moscow's military capabilities and willingness to use them. The attacks serve multiple objectives: degrading Ukraine's defensive infrastructure, testing Western-supplied air defense systems, and demonstrating resilience against international pressure. Russian military planners understand that sustained strikes, even if they do not produce immediate battlefield breakthroughs, can erode morale and create long-term economic and social strain. Additionally, the escalation sends a message to Washington that U.S. political transitions or debates will not slow Russia's operational tempo. Analysts suggest that Moscow may also be attempting to exploit perceived uncertainty surrounding future U.S. policy toward Ukraine, particularly as discussions about military aid, negotiations, and burden sharing continue in American political circles. By escalating now, Russia positions itself as an unavoidable factor in any diplomatic equation. The message is clear: Russia will not pause its campaign simply because talks are underway elsewhere. This approach aligns with Russia's broader strategy of maintaining constant pressure while keeping its adversaries off balance. The escalation also reflects confidence in Russia's strike capabilities, particularly its ability to launch coordinated missile and drone attacks despite sanctions and battlefield losses. For Moscow, the timing reinforces the idea that diplomacy and warfare are intertwined tools, each used to strengthen the other. The escalation ahead of the meeting thus represents not desperation, but a deliberate effort to assert strategic relevance at a critical moment. Ukraine's response to the renewed escalation highlights both its resilience and the immense challenges it continues to face. Ukrainian air defense units were activated across multiple regions as incoming missiles and drones were detected, with officials reporting interceptions that prevented even greater damage. However, the sheer volume and frequency of the attacks underscore the limits of Ukraine's current defensive capacity. While Western-supplied systems such as Patriot and other air defense platforms have significantly improved Ukraine's ability to protect key assets, they are not unlimited. Each interception comes at a cost, consuming valuable missiles that are expensive and time-consuming to replace. Ukrainian military commanders must therefore make difficult decisions about which targets to prioritize, balancing the protection of civilian infrastructure against the need to defend military and logistical hubs. The escalation has renewed calls from Kyiv for additional air defense support, emphasizing that the conflict has entered a phase where protection from the air is as critical as ground operations. Ukrainian officials have also framed the attacks as evidence that Russia remains committed to prolonged warfare rather than meaningful negotiations. Despite the pressure, Ukraine's leadership has sought to project confidence, highlighting its ability to adapt and its determination to continue resisting aggression. The timing of the escalation, however, places Ukraine in a sensitive position diplomatically. As President Zelensky prepares for discussions with key international figures, including Donald Trump, he must simultaneously manage a domestic population under fire and reassure allies that continued support will be used effectively. The Ukrainian response to the escalation is therefore not only military, but political and psychological, aimed at demonstrating endurance in the face of sustained pressure. This moment underscores how deeply intertwined Ukraine's battlefield performance is with its diplomatic efforts, particularly when major international discussions loom. The escalation ahead of the Trump-Zelensky meeting has placed the United States at the center of renewed scrutiny regarding its role in the conflict. As Ukraine's most significant military supporter, Washington's policies and political debates have direct consequences on the battlefield. The timing of Russia's strikes appears designed to influence American discourse, reminding U.S. policymakers that the conflict remains active and consequential. For Donald Trump, whose views on Ukraine and U.S. foreign commitments have been closely watched, the escalation adds complexity to any discussions with President Zelensky. The meeting is likely to address not only immediate military needs, but also broader questions about the future of U.S. support, potential diplomatic pathways, and the long-term strategy toward Russia. From a U.S. military perspective, the escalation reinforces arguments that sustained assistance is necessary to prevent further destabilization in Europe. Defense analysts warn that any perception of wavering support could embolden Russia to increase pressure even further. At the same time, the situation highlights the challenges of managing foreign policy amid domestic political debates. The escalation serves as a reminder that U.S. decisions reverberate far beyond Washington, influencing calculations in Kyiv and Moscow alike. As missiles fall on Ukrainian cities, the implications of American leadership and commitment are once again brought into sharp focus. The Trump-Zelensky meeting, occurring against this backdrop, is therefore more than a diplomatic engagement. It is a moment that could shape perceptions of U.S. resolve and influence the trajectory of the war. The escalation has effectively raised the stakes, ensuring that U.S. policy choices remain under intense global observation. Beyond the bilateral dynamics between the United States and Ukraine, the escalation has significant implications for NATO and European security as a whole. European allies have closely monitored the renewed attacks, viewing them as a reminder of the persistent threat posed by Russia's military capabilities. The timing of the strikes reinforces concerns that the conflict could spill over or escalate further if deterrence weakens. NATO members have continued to emphasize unity and preparedness, with some countries accelerating defense spending and reinforcing their eastern flanks. The escalation ahead of a high-profile diplomatic meeting also underscores the importance of coordination among allies, particularly in messaging and military assistance. European leaders recognize that divisions or mixed signals could be exploited by Moscow to advance its objectives. The attacks have reignited discussions about long-term security architecture in Europe, including the need for enhanced air defense networks and greater industrial capacity to sustain military aid. For NATO, the situation highlights the challenge of balancing deterrence with de-escalation, ensuring that support for Ukraine remains strong without triggering wider conflict. The escalation serves as a stark reminder that the war in Ukraine is not a distant regional issue, but a central element of European and transatlantic security. As diplomats and defense officials assess the situation, the strikes ahead of the Trump-Zelensky meeting reinforce the urgency of maintaining cohesion and strategic clarity among allies. The broader security implications extend well beyond Ukraine's borders, shaping defense planning across the continent. International reactions to the escalation have reflected widespread concern about the war's trajectory and its potential global impact. Governments across Asia, the Middle East, and other regions have issued statements urging restraint, while closely observing how major powers respond. The timing of the escalation has amplified its visibility, transforming it into a global event rather than a routine phase of the conflict. Strategic analysts note that Russia's actions are also aimed at a global audience, signaling that it remains a formidable military actor capable of shaping international agendas. For countries watching from afar, the escalation highlights the risks associated with unresolved conflicts and great power rivalry. The attacks ahead of a high-level diplomatic meeting reinforce perceptions that military force remains a primary tool of influence in contemporary geopolitics. At the same time, Ukraine's continued resistance has drawn admiration and support from many nations, reinforcing narratives about sovereignty and international law. The global reaction underscores how the war has become a touchstone for broader debates about security, alliances, and the rules-based international order. As news of the strikes spread, media coverage and public opinion further amplified their impact, ensuring that the escalation would influence discussions well beyond the immediate region. The strategic messaging embedded in the attacks, directed at Ukraine, the United States, and the international community, demonstrates how modern warfare extends beyond the battlefield into the realms of perception and influence. The escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war ahead of the Trump-Zelensky meeting offers important insights into the conflict's likely future. It suggests that periods of diplomatic engagement will continue to coincide with heightened military activity as each side seeks to strengthen its position. For Ukraine, the challenge will be sustaining defense capabilities and international support amid ongoing pressure. For the United States and its allies, the escalation reinforces the need for consistent strategy and clear communication. Russia's actions demonstrate that it is prepared to use military force as a tool to shape political outcomes, regardless of diplomatic timelines. This reality complicates efforts to pursue negotiations or de-escalation without credible deterrence. As the war enters another year, the pattern of escalation around key moments may become increasingly familiar. The Trump-Zelensky meeting, taking place under the shadow of renewed attacks, symbolizes the complex interplay between diplomacy and warfare that defines this conflict. Ultimately, the escalation serves as a reminder that the path to resolution remains uncertain and fraught with risk. The war's future will depend not only on battlefield developments, but also on political decisions made in capitals around the world. In this context, the events surrounding the escalation highlight the enduring importance of leadership, alliances, and strategic resolve in shaping the course of one of the most consequential conflicts of the modern era.